Ah, shit, I guess it's time to make another video! It's not often that you'll find legendary people in the anime industry. I mean, it's such a degenerate medium of entertainment anyways, you'd be hard-pressed to find a reason why it's worth putting effort into. But every now and then, you'll come across people who pour their hearts into telling stories through anime, whose talent shows whenever they inspire the millions of people who watch these stories, who devote their lives to their effort and creativity. Creativity is by no means something you can force, I should know from how much I put off writing scripts for videos, so you can't help but feel admiration for these people. People tend to glance over this point though. The stigma nowadays seems to be that great stories and creativity both come when you throw enough money at it. Japan isn't as big about disclosing budgets to their movies as the rest of the world, but it's very fair to assume the budget to films like Wolf Children and Your Name were well over $1 billion yen, or at least very close to it, which would equate to nearly 10 million US dollars. Animation isn't cheap after all, and obviously the better animation looks, the more money was poured into making it look that way. I can guarantee you, whatever person you assume to be a legend in the anime industry made their stories through the power of money. Every once in a while, though, there is an underdog. There's something that comes along to remind us that sometimes, to reach the heart of millions, all you need is passion, and probably a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. This is the story of 10 people, huddled in one room for nearly 2 years, with a budget of next to nothing, who, against all odds, went on to create a story that revolutionized not only the anime industry as a whole, but also all of Japan. This is the antithesis to all the artificial, high-budget, oversaturated stories we've come to make do with. This is Kemono, friends, and its director Tatsuki-san, who is without a doubt a legend. Kemono Friends drops us into the vast, vibrant, imperfectly CG-rendered world of Japari Park, and yes, this is in fact what it looks like for the entirety of the show. I know it's a hard pill to swallow, but you'll get used to it quickly, trust me. If you can get by the infamous Clannad eyes, then this is nothing. Japari Park is a world full of animals who somehow seemingly all turned into humanoids, or friends as they call them in the show. This doesn't seem to faze them though, as they go on to live their normal everyday lives in the wide variety of environments Japari Park has to offer. Enter the human, who one day finds herself in the savannah with no knowledge of how she got there, or even who she is. After a beautifully rendered chase sequence, I must say, really top-notch, the human is introduced to a new friend, a serval cat, unsurprisingly named Serval. Serval doesn't know which species this girl is either, but still manages to come up with a name for her, that being Kaban, which is the Japanese word for bag. Right? Because she has a bag on her back? It's funny! Laugh right now, damn you! I don't know, not that it's a bad name, it just seems a little uncreative on Serval's part to be basing a name simply on something you have, right? Like, while we're at it, why don't we make my name Social Anxiety Issues? While Serval doesn't know exactly which species Kaban is, she's certain they'll find that out at Japari Park's library, which for some reason is so goddamn far away. I don't know why you'd want to go through the effort of reading a book if it means having to go through hell and back, man. I wouldn't read a book unless you paid me, let alone all this adventure shit. Oh well. And thus, Kaban and Serval set off on a journey where they encounter a ton of other friends, such as an American beaver named American Beaver, a lion named Lion, a black-tailed prairie dog named Black-tailed Prairie Dog, and a hippopotamus named, you guessed it, Betty. Nah, just kidding, hippopotamus. They run into some other shenanigans as they meet more friends, and everything is fun and game until the two finally reach the library, from which a sinister reality behind the park and the friends' existence slowly begins to unravel. And that's about all I can say without spoiling it. So, Kemono Friends, where to begin with this show? I think the characters I just mentioned would be a good starting point. It's immediately what comes to mind when I think of what makes this show so great. Specifically, I'll start with the performances behind these characters. It's without a doubt where you immediately see Tatsuki's brilliance. He's just so great at creating down-to-earth personalities. You see, Kemono Friends is what's commonly referred to as an Eiyashike anime, or healing anime as it's known in English, where the idea is to create an anime that's as comfy as possible such that it has a soothing effect on the audience. Plot doesn't necessarily matter, you just want to sit back and watch the scenery or admire the characters. And when it comes to admiring the characters, it should make sense that you find them relatable, right? That's essentially the opposite of what you'd see elsewhere. Their acting shouldn't be big and boisterous in a way that you'd see in a lot of other stories, since real life doesn't exactly work like that. Those other stories are allowed to get away with overacting since it's fiction and the idea is to take you away from real life. And honestly, it doesn't surprise me one bit that Tatsuki managed to put together a cast very fitting for a comfy slice of life show. As I mentioned before, the show was incredibly low budget, so obviously none of the cast members are the big, flashy actors you'd see elsewhere. Most of the cast members on the show either had very little acting experience beforehand or debuted their acting career through Kemono Friends, and that includes the main role, the voice actress for Serval. It makes sense why they do this, seeing as the budget for the show was next to nothing, so they obviously can't afford more famous voice actresses, but this casting decision fortunately works out in the show's benefit. Whether these actresses were just desperate for roles or personally knew Tatsuki or whatever, I love this casting choice for a number of different reasons. First of all, it makes the characters all the more unique, and this can apply to any movie or TV show or whatever that chooses to have actors who aren't famous. I'm sure a lot of people experience this problem too, but when I hear a famous actor doing a voice for a character, I don't hear the character, I hear the actor. Not that the actor is bad, and I'm sure their vocal range is fine, but the overexposure to that actor's voice makes it so that they're adding no sense of uniqueness to whatever character they're voicing. Sure, well-known voice actors are less recognizable in a language I'm not familiar with, but the opposite effect of non-famous voice actors giving their role their own sense of charm is still very much the case here. They also add to the sense of healing because, well, as I previously said, this cast is made up of everyday people, which helps achieve the goal of making a relatable Iyashikei anime. Adding on to that thought, Tatsuki's style of direction coincides so well with the relatable voice cast. It's just so grounded and down to earth. If you look at Tatsuki's short films, you can see this tone carry over too. If you want an idea of what I'm talking about, this tone is best exemplified in Tatsuki's miniseries called Hentatsu. Pretty much all of it consists of just two friends having a casual conversation, whether it be at a coffee shop, at the park, whatever. I absolutely love it because you could hardly tell it apart from the many conversations you'd have with a friend of yours, so it's extremely easy to connect to. And if that whole concept seems boring to you, fuck you. Keep in mind that this kind of thing isn't for everyone. That's exactly what Kemono Friends is too, an acquired taste if you will, albeit this grounded tone is done to a smaller degree. But even then, when watching Kemono Friends, you can just feel that friendly atmosphere, that wholesome and comfy Tatsuki charm. His creative style is absolutely irreplicable, and this point is further accentuated when you have a look at Kemono Friends related things that Tatsuki didn't have his hand in making. The spin-off manga, the smartphone app, they're all great, but even if they were absolutely flawless, they'd still be missing that touch that gave the anime its own sense of uniqueness, you feel me? Tatsuki made Kemono Friends his own. That's why I worry for Season 2 of the anime, which Tatsuki won't be directing. For all I know, it could end up being a flawless masterpiece, but without Tatsuki, it wouldn't feel like Kemono Friends. But more on that later. Anyways, let's get back to what I was talking about before I started jerking off Tatsuki. Now that I've talked about the non-fictional roles behind the characters, let's take a gander at the characters themselves. For the most part, this series follows Serval and Kaban. Serval is the cutest motherfucker I've ever seen in my entire goddamn life. Like, the other characters don't even stand a chance, and I feel sorry for them. No, I don't. How fucking dare you think that you were nearly as cute as Serval? Get the fuck out of here. Golden snub-nosed monkey, who the fuck even are you? Not even this animation, with a budget you couldn't even buy a tuna sandwich with, hinders in her grace and beauty. 10 out of 10, I would have my kids with her. Don't tell the police, I don't want to have to justify bestiality to them again.
Get on the ground! Get on the ground right now!
She's also a bit of a goof, not necessarily an idiot, but just the right level of clumsiness that leaves you gawking at how adorable she is. God, could she be any more perfect? Why can't God end my life now and reincarnate me as a cute anime cat girl? So Serval's an adorable idiot, and on the other end of the spectrum we got Kaban. Kaban doesn't reach this level of cuteness and appeal, but coinciding with Serval's intelligence, or lack thereof, this character ties into one of the biggest themes of this anime, that being brains over brawn, which is something I really enjoyed. Kaban is always making tools or solving puzzles for the friends while everyone else does the heavy work, and it's not because Kaban's a genius or anything, it's just that humans are comparatively much smarter than wild animals. It makes Serval and Kaban a great duo. Kaban is the brains of the operation that'll plan things out for everyone else, and Serval is the one who will carry out those plans through her brute strength. These traits show whenever the two separate, too. For example, Serval would rather climb a mountain using that brute strength of hers, while Kaban finds a more technical way up. You can see that in the greater scheme of things, too. Each character in the show accentuates the traits of whichever species they're supposed to represent, and seeing how it plays into their personality or certain situations can really get creative at times. For one thing, you see this in the way they act. For example, the prairie dog character is very social and outgoing, much like the animal in real life. But aside from that, this even carries on over into really minute details, like even the character design. For example, the Shoebill character looks very menacing and the other characters fear her because of this, but she's actually really nice and she just so happens to look angry all the time because of the way her face is structured, much like the real life equivalent. I know I'm rambling, but I just love the little details like that. The writers definitely did their research. You learn so much about these animals. They even have clips between the commercial break where a professional gives more information on whatever animal you've just seen.
サーバルはですね、基本的にはアフリカのサバンナと言われる地域に過ごしていまして、若干草が生えているところなので、そういったところで歩きやすいようにサーバルは細長い個体で、あと耳も大きいので遠くの音を聞こえるようにジャンプ力ですかね。高いところにスッとジャンプできる動物でして、結構高いところが好きなので、軽々と1メートル2メートル余裕でジャンプしてくれますね。
I know this doesn't contribute much to the story, but the little things like that are really what makes this show feel complete, and I just love learning these fun facts. Just as enjoyable as the show's characters is the show's tone. Just as implied before, they don't try to pull anything big and grand, at least most of the time. Yeah, the show is technically an adventure, but every episode of Dora the Explorer is technically an adventure too now, isn't it? Doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be all action-packed and flashy. Along the way, we're more focused on the friends we make rather than the enemies we defeat. To summarize it in one word, it's wholesome. It's very wholesome. The show is just so welcoming, so friendly, it easily put me in a good mood. It's as encouraging as it is friendly too. Whether it be individual strength or strength in numbers, this group is able to solve anything, and it really lifted my spirits. It got me to believe that I could get through anything. Got me to believe that maybe for just a second, society could accept me for being a weeaboo. But this show's a motivator, not a miracle worker. So go figure. Just overall, if you need something uplifting to raise your spirits and cheer you up, you can't go wrong with Kemono, friends. I know on the surface it may seem like a bit of a gamble to watch it since it's not nearly as popular here in America, so if you want a more familiar comparison to see if it matches your taste, I'd say this show is pretty similar in tone to Yuru Camp? Any y'all ever watch that one? It's comparable in the sense of how laid back it is, not in how relaxing it is. Not that Kemono Friends isn't a relaxing show, but nothing's ever gonna top Yuru Camp in comfiness. So we've talked about the characters, we've talked about the tone, lastly we have the story. I know I gave a good summary of the plot earlier, but that's the overarching plot. Each episode of this series is practically its own adventure. Serval's over here getting herself into all kinds of hijinks. Serval rides in this little tub to flee from a group of these flying blue testicle monsters called ceruleans. Serval builds an entire house for a beaver after fucking up her progress on the one she was already building. Serval lifts a goddamn bus over her head to help the gang cross a river. Serval has to dodge the IRS after falsely claiming Kaban as a dependent on her tax forms and ultimately committing tax fraud. Yeah, just kidding, but at least that shit is more believable than some of the other things I mentioned. Seriously, a goddamn bus. Right over her head like it's fucking nothing. The meme in the anime community is that Mugi from K-On! Is the one that has superhuman strength, but why the fuck aren't we talking about the absolute unit that is Serval? That's not just a fluke in the story either. There's a spin-off manga for Kemono Friends where Serval effortlessly lifts a 300-kilogram boulder over her head, mind you, that translates into 660 pounds, and throws it a distance of 16 meters. She's effortlessly lifting these heavy objects with no goddamn problem at all. Can you imagine where her limit is at? Like, do you see these twig arms of hers? How the hell do they not snap under all that weight? No, not just that. When you think about it, there's a lot of wasted potential on Serval here. What with her being able to lift something this heavy while still being this scrawny, can you imagine the sheer ungodly strength she'd have if she were to actually hit up the gym? Swole Serval would be the kind of shit that brings Saitama to shame. I mentioned before how in love I am with Serval, but now I'm in fear. I'd worry for my life around her. One nasty argument with her and she'd punch you into goddamn outer space. What were we talking about here? You know what my favorite method of storytelling is? Show, don't tell. If your story is fantastic and stands well on its own, then let it speak for itself. I'm not going to act like dialogue isn't important because of course it is, it's what drives the story forward most of the time, but you can only take that so far, at least in my case. I've come across a ton of shows I've hated because it's nothing but talking, explanations, planning, exposition, whatever. See, the more you have to justify your dialogue from how complicated the story is, the more you're narrowing down who your core audience can be that still cares at that point. There's still those that'll appreciate it, I'm sure, but I see accessibility of a story to be something to strive for in these situations. Because when it comes to watching movies or TV shows, let me just say I'm an impatient motherfucker. Especially for anime. Sometimes when a Western movie's getting deep into its explanations, you can just kinda tune out the visuals and listen to the dialogue, but in anime I have to read subtitles, and reading sucks, man, so don't waste my time with that shit. If you're gonna spend your time on screen without action and overall just not taking advantage of the visual element of television, then at that point, how is reading these subtitles different from reading a fucking book? I know that's ironic coming from me, a visual novel fanatic, when visual novels have to rely on text and dialogue to drive the story forward, but truth be told, I wasn't a fan of visual novels like Narcissu that didn't utilize the visual aspect of visual novels. I know it's a stupid criticism, but it's my preference, goddammit. Unless you're the eulogy episode of BoJack Horseman, then I want my eyes to be entertained as much as my ears. With that being said, Kemono Friends is an absolutely great example of show don't tell. I know it's pretty ironic that a show known for having butt-ugly CG is hitting the head on the nail when it comes to visual subtlety, but the world building here is fantastic. Japari Park is so vast, so grand, they really took advantage of this show being an adventure anime. Speaking of subtlety, this show has a little bit of mystery in its plot going on in the background too. See, Kemono Friends is as complicated as you want it to be, and that's one of the biggest things I'd praise about this show. If you watch it casually and think nothing of it, then yeah, you're gonna understand it just fine. Hell, it's an anime you could show to your kids if you wanted to. It's just as absent-minded as most of the TV shows geared towards children. But some of the dark stuff that goes on in later episodes leaves a lot of room for discussion and speculation for those a bit more focused on the plot. Hell, even I have some theories of my own. It's a show for everyone. I think every age group is capable of finding their own reason why the show is great. And I can definitely say, the more you give a shit about the subjective part of the story, the more you're gonna like this anime. That's something I definitely recommend if you ever decide to watch Kemono Friends sometime in the future. All I ask is that you try to give a shit about it. It's hard to get into at first, but give it time. You really have to let the show settle in before you can appreciate it for what it is. Episode 1 is the toughest to get through, but at least wait until you get to episode 4. If you don't like it by then fine, drop it. But know that hating on Kemono Friends makes you an outlier in consumers of Japanese media, and in that case, give me your weeb card, you fucking normie. Go back to Instagram and post a picture of your pumpkin spice latte. But hold on, you say. Whatever opinion someone has of this show shouldn't be held so highly, now should it? Well, that brings me on to my next topic, and I wasn't kidding when I said people who dislike this show are practically 1 in a million. Kemono Friends exploded in popularity after the anime aired in Japan, and it quickly became a cultural phenomenon. Getting a grasp of the popularity behind Kemono Friends is pretty essential to understanding why it's so loved, so I'll do my best to give a good summary here, but if you really want to learn more about all this, then I highly recommend you watch Zaria's video called The Rise and Fall of Anime's Biggest Underdog. I reference his video a lot when writing the script for this video, with his permission of course. See, there's his Twitter and here's mine. And overall his video is this one but better. But yeah, I'll do my best to summarize the information that he gives and add a little more on top of that, but this is really an interesting topic on its own that I encourage you to do your own research on. That's what I've been doing. Zaria just so happened to beat me to the punch while I was in the middle of writing the script to this video. I can't begin to tell you how embarrassed I felt watching his video and being all like, his information's the same as mine, is it gonna look like I'm copying him or what? But no, everything's in good intention here, I'm just using this guy as a reference, go check out his video. So yeah, Kemono Friends' popularity. To put it into perspective for you, Nico Nico Doga is a video streaming site in Japan that anime producers will often put the first episode of a show on for free viewing, with the idea being encouraging the viewer to watch the full series. Is the Order a Rabbit was the previous record holder for most views on a first episode, having accumulated 9 million views over 3.5 years. Kemono Friends broke that record in 8 months. Today, it sits at 13 million views, and mind you, that's more views than the AAA anime we're crazy about over here in the West, like Attack on Titan. Remember, this is a show with animation that looks like this. absolutely trampling over anime that we love in the West, or pretty much all anime in general. In terms of the revenue Kemono Friends makes, Blu-ray sales is a nice thing to look at when determining the success of an anime, and DVD sales too, but who gives a shit about that since it isn't the medium anymore. But numbers for Kemono Friends have been all over the place for two reasons. First of all, Kemono Friends was being sold as a book that had volume 1 of the Blu-ray bundled with it, which is surprisingly where a large chunk of the sales have come from. Something about it being a huge bargain, or people may have purchased it with the intent of reading the book with the Blu-ray being an unintended bonus, I don't know. The point is there's a lot of arguments regarding whether or not this stupid book counts as part of the Blu-ray sales. Second, when ranking Blu-ray and DVD sales, a lot of people count out shows like Kemono Friends because of specific definitions for what an anime Blu-ray should constitute as. It's often that CG shows aren't taken into consideration whatsoever. So with that being said, take this as you will what with how subjective the success is here, but a year and a half ago the Kemono Friends team made a statement that the first 2 volumes of the Blu-ray sold 120,000 units, and who knows how many it's been since then. And for comparison's sake, Some Anything lists Evangelion as the highest selling anime DVD/Blu-ray at over 200,000 units, but in second place, as far as I can tell, is Bakemonogatari with 112,000 units. Remember, Kemono Friends isn't listed because it isn't 2D animated. So subjectively, aside from Evangelion, which is a total outlier, Kemono Friends is the most successful anime of all time. And again, information regarding this in Blu-ray/DVD sales in general is all over the place. I found another website that says Love Live Sunshine Season 2 sold over 250,000 units, while Some Anything listed as 65,000, so I don't fucking know, man. Blu-ray releases being broken up into like a million different volumes probably hinders in the numbers. So if anyone wants to correct my research, then by all means feel free to do so. I encourage you to, with how confusing this all is to me, but that doesn't dispute the enormous success the show has gotten. Reaching over 100K in terms of Blu-ray sales is quite an enormous feat by itself. But wait, there's more! Kemono Friends' theme song rose to 3rd place in the iTunes charts whenever it was released. 3rd place. Imagine being a AAA artist and having your studio pour endless amounts of money into making a new hip single only to be topped by the theme song of a fucking children's cartoon. Hell, the song's even achieved gold status since it's gotten over 100,000 sales in Japan. And before you go off saying, oh, gold isn't as impressive as platinum status or whatever, again, remember, this is the fucking theme song of a children's cartoon. It's not just the theme song either. Tons of other Kemono Friends merchandise topped Amazon rankings, and often you'd see this stuff sold out because they weren't expecting the show to be nearly as popular as it was. Oh, how about social outreach? Well, in the winter 2017 season Kemono Friends was airing in, they absolutely fucking annihilated the competition when it came to Twitter ratings. Over 1,250,000 tweets were made about the show in the span of 1 month. Then coming in second place was Gintama with over 300,000 tweets made about it. Kemono Friends is 4 times that amount. And the reason I keep emphasizing this is that this is completely against all odds. Keep in mind, in the winter 2017 season, Kemono Friends was competing against Konosuba Season 2, Kobayashi Maid Dragon, Little Witch Academia, and a ton of other stuff. And then, of course, we have the story of Grape-kun. I'm sure if you keep any tabs on the anime community, then surely you've heard of him. But basically, NHK released a report that the number of visits to zoos in Japan increased as a direct result from inspired viewers of Kemono Friends. Understandably too, as the show educates you on a variety of different animals, as I mentioned before, so unsurprisingly viewers who are interested in that kind of stuff would want to learn more. Well, Kemono Friends saw this as a great opportunity, so they teamed up with a handful of different zoos to put cardboard cutouts of the show's characters into the exhibits of the real-life counterparts. What started out as a cute little advertisement ended up being an internet phenomenon as Grape-kun, a Humboldt penguin at the Tobu Zoo, Tobu, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, seemingly fell in love with the cardboard cutout in his exhibit. He displayed mating behavior towards the cardboard cutout, and almost always he'd be standing by its side. And this story is pretty funny until you realize Grape-kun actually had a mate before all this, but after a decade-long relationship, that nasty penguin thought left him for a younger penguin. He became isolated from the other penguins. He was basically a failure in their eyes. And surely you get the big idea by now. Grape-kun is a social outcast in love with an anime girl. He's basically one of us weeaboos. It just goes to show that waifus transcend the human race, huh? Grape-kun quickly rose in popularity, and it even got to the point where the voice actress for that penguin in Kemono Friends visited Grape-kun. For the first time in years, Grape-kun was happy again, but his time in the spotlight was short-lived. His health began to decline about 6 months after the cardboard cutouts were placed in the exhibits, and on October 12, 2017, the zoo announced Grape-kun's death. There was a shrine made in his honor, and countless visitors came to honor him, give him flowers, make him drawings. I'm fairly certain Grape-kun was trending on Twitter that day too. As of January 2018, he's been forever immortalized in that penguin exhibit in the form of a new cardboard cutout being placed there, where Grape-kun stands right by his waifu's side, forever and always. Now, you may have seen what I said just now as a bit of a tangent, but there's a point to all this. People give a shit about Kemono Friends. They'll give a shit to the point where they'll mourn over the life of a penguin. I'm part of this mob mentality too, and I absolutely love it. I love that this show has somehow found a way to get the popularity I think it absolutely deserves despite all these circumstances against it. When you see the animation here, when you see that the animation of the bus doesn't even have the wheels turning, you can't help but feel sorry, like you're cheering on this show and you're thankful it even got made at all. It's a miracle, because much like the story of Grape-kun, the way the Kemono Friends franchise began was pretty tragic. This is a show based on a mobile game in which support for it ended before the first episode of the anime even aired because they were doubtful the show was going to have any kind of success whatsoever. When the series debuted, its score on MAL was 4.5, an entire 3 points below where it is now. When the episode aired on Nico Nico, it was met with an approval rating of 41%. Critics from both Japan and the West were unbearably cruel to the show's poor presentation. In pretty much any other situation like this, you'd give up hope for the franchise, but somehow a miracle happened. By episode 2, viewers had started to have a change in heart, and the show trended on Twitter for a bit. By episode 3, the approval rating had risen to 89%. By episode 4, the series had become the juggernaut we know it as today. In the span of 3 weeks, Kemono Friends had turned from universally hated to universally loved. If you know anything at all about how big of an impact first impressions make, then if that's not an underdog story, I don't know what the hell is. And viewers having this change of heart makes sense because, like I said, on the surface it's ugly, but you have to let it resonate with you to see the love and effort put into this series from the few people that put it together. And let me emphasize that again too. A lot of this admirability comes from how small the staff is. Not including the voice actors or producers, you could count the number of staff members this show had on your own 2 hands. With few people to divide the workload among, it's safe to assume they formed a personal connection with what they were doing after working so much. Like, director Tatsuki actually made the 3D models you see in the show himself, alongside co-writing most of the plot and script. As you come to realize how much the staff has connected to their project, you can't help but connect to it too. You feel so proud of the work done here. You may even grow to love this low-quality CGI, knowing it was the best effort the staff could make with how low their budget was. Now, this sympathy, this feeling of personal connection you're experiencing right now, put a pin in it. We're gonna get back to it later, so just keep it in the back of your head. I'm gonna go off on another tangent here related to something you may or may not have heard about. It's September 2017. As a Kemono Friends fan, you couldn't be more hopeful for the future. Season 2 of this series has been greenlit for production, and the final episode of Season 1 ended in, well, not necessarily a cliffhanger, but in a way that leaves the story open to a lot of new possibilities. Like, it's understandable that the story wouldn't end here, of course. Tatsuki ends Season 1 on a bit of a darker note, and your expectations for Season 2 are going wild. You can't wait to see how the second season is going to expand upon this darker tone we've barely explored in the first season. Serval's gonna be finally hitting up those roids, dodging the police, trying to find that damn fourth Chaos Emerald. Enough of this cutesy shit, I'm ready for gritty Kemono Friends. In comes fucking Kawa, the single greatest piece of shit company in the world that makes companies like EA, Comcast, and United look like the fucking messiah. The Kemono Friends anime was under the great misfortune of being owned by Kadokawa, whose only goal for any project they consume is to milk as much money as humanly fucking possible out of it. Kadokawa does the kind of business practices Evolve's downloadable content aspires to do. They're that bad. Now, when you think about it, this whole thing started out as kind of a mutual relationship for both Kadokawa and Yaoyorozu, the small studio that made Kemono Friends. On one hand, Yaoyorozu was probably thankful to be working on this project at all, what with the Kemono Friends app having very little popularity before the anime aired. On the other hand, you got Kadokawa, who's over here like,
we've got to have money.
They see this series as a way to make a quick buck. It's not going to make a lot of profit, so just don't give it a big budget at all. Get most of your money through forced merchandising, then hope and pray that some kid's mom is going to pick up the Blu-ray in the bargain bin. Yao Yorotsu is working on this show with hardly any money in their pocket, but God bless them, this show gets done because they want it to get done through their hard work. So then, Kemono Friends explodes in popularity out of nowhere, and Kadokawa's looking back on all this thinking, okay, this became an unexpected cash cow for us. Now that there's a bigger spotlight on this series, how can we handle it like even bigger pieces of shit? So they of course do their shilling out of the series with spin-off mangas, smartphone games, plushies, whatever. But yeah, sure, that's fine. The consumer demand for Kemono Friends merch is so high, so if you want to make as much money as possible along the way, then you do you. It's not like Kadokawa hasn't done that for every other series they own. The thing about this is, and as I mentioned before, whenever Kemono Friends has some kind of spin-off or appears in some other form of media, for all I know, it could be Full Metal Alchemist level of quality, absolutely flawless in every way possible, but at the end of the day, because director Tatsuki didn't have his hand in any of these side projects, it wouldn't feel like Kemono Friends. Tatsuki has a unique style of direction that I feel has defined Kemono Friends as a series. So anything else that comes out of this series feels like something that isn't Kemono Friends, but trying its best to replicate it, even with it being part of the Kemono Friends series. Basically, Kemono Friends isn't Kemono Friends without Tatsuki, and everybody knows this. Except for Kadokawa, because on September 25th, Kadokawa fired Tatsuki from the production of the second season. Now, as soon as Tatsuki revealed this, providing no explanation whatsoever as to why it happened, it's not hard to imagine how pissed off fans were at this, condemning Kadokawa in whatever way possible. This ultimately ended up becoming arguably the biggest anime controversy of 2017. Kadokawa trended worldwide that day, with a ton of other hashtags spawning such as hashtag no Tatsuki no Tanoshi, Tanoshi being the Japanese word for fun, which is commonly repeated throughout the show. Angry comments were left on the previously mentioned first episode of Kemono Friends uploaded to Nico Nico Doga, and some declared they would cancel their Nico Nico Doga premium membership, as Nico Nico Doga and Kadokawa both share the same parent company. Speaking of monetary loss, stock prices for Kadokawa fell 3.3% just within the day Tatsuki announced he was fired. Now, let's take a look at things from Kadokawa's perspective. The entire anime community is pissed off at a company for an incident they haven't even publicly acknowledged yet. So right now, they're in some deep shit that they need to get out of. Christ comes down from heaven and hands them a book on how not to handle a controversy, and by God, they follow that book down to a T. Each and every attempt Kadokawa made to try to recover from this incident ultimately landed them into deeper shit, and by now their grave has been dug so deep that they've passed the end of Evangelion. And that's fucking deep, man. So then, what is it that Kadokawa did after all this that made their dilemma worse? Soon after all this shit went down, the Kemono Friends production committee made a statement about the reason why Tatsuki was fired. Apparently, he was using the Kemono Friends property on his own without consulting Kadokawa, which I guess infringes on copyright. Seems like a justifiable way to fire someone until you look at the specifics of the situation. A week after episode 12 aired, which was the final episode and as I mentioned before ended in a way that hyped you up for season 2, fans quite understandably demanded a 13th episode to the point where it reached Twitter's international trend list. So, to thank his fans, Tatsuki made a mini episode to serve as an epilogue, which was barely even 2 minutes long, using his own time and his own money, and to top it all off, Tatsuki even got permission from the series creator of Kemono Friends to make this mini episode. You heard that right. The straw that broke the camel's back and made everyone lose respect for Kadokawa was caused over a 2-minute Kemono Friends video. Even if it was technically a violation of contract, why the hell would they care over something this minute? Was it because the video was uploaded free to watch on the internet? Did Kadokawa honestly see that much potential to profit off of a 2-minute video? It's also worth mentioning that aside from the mini episode, these videos that constitute as Kadokawa's reason for firing Tatsuki are inclusive of a number of different Kemono Friends promotional videos Tatsuki and his team worked on. Sponsorships, essentially. There's one with JRA and another with Nysin, or however that's pronounced. Both of these companies made it clear, however, that they worked with Kadokawa for the rights to Kemono Friends before the promotional videos were even released. So either Kadokawa forgot that conversation ever happened, or they straight up lied. Now, to be fair, the former does have a chance at being true, as Kadokawa is a company with multiple different branches, so perhaps just because one branch of the company knows of the partnership doesn't mean the whole company knows by extension. But given the deceitful, victim-playing nature of the rest of the statement Kadokawa made regarding why Tatsuki was fired, there's some fair grounds to say they're grasping at straws here. So up until this point, it was a shitty situation, sure, but an argument could still somehow be made in Kadokawa's favor. They were being greedy, whiny little bitches about it, sure, and pretty much everyone was on Tatsuki's side, and whatever attempt Kadokawa made to fix this was like pouring salt on the wound. But if you at least had an understanding of how harsh things can be in business, then maybe you could see where they were coming from. Oh, don't worry though, they keep pouring salt on the wound, so if you like using this company as a verbal punching bag up until this point, then don't worry, they're only going to give you plenty of more reason to do so. Now you could tell they were out for Tatsuki's blood. They were gonna make him cry like an anime fan on prom night. There were a lot of people understandably unsatisfied with Kadokawa's spineless justification, so someone at Kadokawa thought maybe an apology was in order for all the commotion this caused. Oh, not the company itself. No, that'd be a normal fucking decision to make. Kadokawa held a live stream where the voice actresses apologized for the controversy, despite the voice actresses having absolutely no connection to the very controversy they were apologizing for. Kadokawa essentially used them as meat shields to deflect the blame on them because they were that fucking cowardly to own up to their poor decisions. And from that point onward, for a good while, the situation sadly just sort of dissolved despite a clear injustice to the franchise Tatsuki had made his own. Yaoyorozu and Kadokawa cut their ties, there was a big he said she said situation going on as to what company was in the wrong. Kadokawa later said they were open to discussing things with Tatsuki again, but of course nothing came out of that, and Kadokawa just kinda took the reins on the series. Sure, it was nothing great, but it was the typical stuff they were doing beforehand. Merchandise, mobile games, whatever. Season 2 was announced before Tatsuki was fired, but after all this went down, not a word had been said about it. For a while, people had lost all hope, but we had come to accept this. Things were mellow now, and we were moving on from what we'd see as nothing more than a smear in anime history. But then, quite literally as I was writing the script for this video, which, to be fair, was still a while back because I'm in no rush to finish my videos, I'm busy with stuff and I'm sorry, Kadokawa brought Season 2 back from out of nowhere. This is Kadokawa's Kemono Friends. This is what the Kemono Friends anime would look like if you were to take the love out of it, run it through the garbage disposal, and artificially shit it out. Oh my god, where to begin? Well, that dislike bar on the teaser trailer should clearly speak for itself. Fans are very obviously still not happy with how Kadokawa is handling this series. And to be fair, they have good reasons to as well. Let's start with how this looks. So after Tatsuki was fired and Yaoyorozu left, Kadokawa scouted a new animation studio to handle Kemono Friends Season 2, and rumor has it that Sunrise was who they were trying to commission. For those who don't know, Sunrise animated shows like Code Geass, Cowboy Bebop, and Love Live, so they have a great track record. And this kinda got everybody excited, because Sunrise is a studio that focuses on 2D animation. Sure, giving this series to Sunrise would make it a far cry from how Season 1 looked, but now that Kadokawa knows this series is successful, they don't have to play things out like they did for Season 1, where the amount of success the show was gonna get was up in the air, so it wasn't worth giving that high of a budget. Now Kadokawa can give this series a proper budget. They can make it look like an actual anime. A 2D Kemono Friends would look foreign, but if the animation was great, then this was the best way Kadokawa could handle this. Instead, we got, this. I don't know who animated this shit, but I'll tell you what, it's probably not Sunrise. Sticking with CG was a cheap move. It's a hopeless attempt at emulating the look of the original while ultimately saving more money in the end. And knowing how cheap Kadokawa is, that's a decision that doesn't surprise me one bit. It saddens me without any doubt, but it doesn't surprise me. Simply put, this looks terrible, and not terrible in the way Season 1 looked while ultimately being respectable in the end because you're glad it got made at all with the budget it had. Just look at this. It's gross. It's not Tanoshi. Fucking look at Serval. She looks like she's been diagnosed with retarded. Even though Season 1 looked bad, the designs at least fit the chibi proportions of the smartphone game. Well-defined body parts, properly proportioned waist and torso, cute face, whatever. This just looks flat, like a cardboard cutout, and not the kind that Grape-kun would fall in love with. Funnily enough, I saw comments on a Reddit thread where people thought from this design that it was 2D animation, but no, it just looks that bad. Now, to be fair, this anime isn't out yet, so I can hardly say much about it. For all I know, maybe the writing and storyboarding team are actually putting an honest effort into this, only to be overshadowed by this whole controversy, and further potential work to be downplayed like that would mean this would be an unforgiving job to take. Regardless, the damage is already done, and with the way things are turning out, this looks like it's gonna be a disaster. And it leaves you thinking, gee, does this get any worse? Ha 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 ha! Of course it does. Soon after this teaser went up, the production team for Kemono Friends Season 2 published a notice for an audition, since they needed new voice actresses to fill these new roles. You had to give a voice demo tape as well as some other personal information like hometown, dialects, and for some weird reason, bust, waist, and hip measurements. Why this was needed for a voice acting audition where the actress herself is never seen, I have no idea. Maybe it just has something to do with the presentability of the actresses for things like public appearances. Maybe that's just a thing in Japan, but part of me wants to believe the production team was just sitting there at their desk beating their meat to the numbers. Like, oh, 92 for the bust measurement. Damn, this girl is thick. Greg, pass me the lotion! Anyways, what really matters here is that the audition script for Kemono Friends was plagiarized. It was written by this person, who I'm not going to bother to find out the pronunciation of their name or their involvement with Kemono Friends. All you need to know is that Kadokawa stole from this person and didn't pay this person any royalties. You know what the irony in all this is? Remember what Tatsuki and his crew were all fired for? Supposed copyright infringement, which was later debunked, and now we've come full circle and we have Kadokawa doing the very thing they fired Tatsuki for. Karma's a bitch, isn't it? Well, Tatsuki steps in here in all this, and he says, these unpaid royalties are pretty interesting because Kadokawa didn't pay me either for screenwriting Season 1 of Kemono Friends. You heard that right. The number of yen Tatsuki made off of his hard work is equal to the amount of people wearing deodorant at a Super Smash Bros. Tournament. Not a single yen. Wow. He's tried to repress this memory due to it being emotionally painful to him, and yeah, I don't blame him. What a piece of shit company. So here we are, modern day. I like to think of that bombshell right there as like a climax to this whole situation, and there's nowhere to go here other than downhill. But honestly, who knows? The only thing we can say for certain is that the Kemono Friends we know and love is dead, and Kadokawa killed it. Now here's why all this matters. Let's rewind for a bit. Remember that sympathetic connection you may have felt watching Kemono Friends that I told you to keep in the back of your head? Think about it now. Kemono Friends is Tatsuki's baby, and we as an audience cherished it with him. Anyone that bothered to look into the production of this anime gained a much deeper connection with its staff than any other anime I can think of. I think I've made it clear by now, but when Tatsuki is robbed of that baby and the love and passion he put into it, you can't help but have mutual feelings. Physically, Kemono Friends is the product of less than a dozen people, but mentally, all of its fan base is a part of it. Like I said, there's a mob mentality going on here. The feeling of togetherness you create as a community impacts the enjoyment you get out of a show, does it not? The same is true the other way around. In terms of anime, Darling in the Franxx had a really toxic community full of childish arguments and comment sections full of people screaming like baboons. And when things escalated to the point where a voice actress on the show started getting death threats, it really made me ashamed to associate myself with the show whenever I watched it, and many people felt the same way. You see this for a lot of shows with bad fan bases outside of anime too. Rick and Morty, Steven Universe, whatever. The shows aren't inherently bad, a lot of them are great in fact, but when you see how a lot of people who also watch the shows are acting, it just really takes the fun out of it. Kemono Friends creates the opposite effect of that. It's a wholesome show that spawned a wholesome fan base, and like most of my favorite anime and visual novels, it's a show that shaped the way I act. It turned me into a generally more cheerful person, and when you're interacting with someone that liked this show, happiness is contagious. God, it's just so great. Most anime are all about being lewd or full of action or whatever, but not a lot of anime will try to reach out to the people watching and try to bring out the best in them. I'm so glad Kemono Friends exists. I'm glad Yaoyorozu got to see their tireless efforts pay off. I'm glad I learned to find the beauty in something that's so ugly on the surface. I'm glad I had Kaban and her friends help me realize my strengths as a person. I'm glad that the feeling of cohesion and coming together that the show portrays as a central theme translated so seamlessly into real life. I'm glad that the world was willing to give a franchise that was down on its last legs a second chance because it genuinely tried to win us back over. I'm glad I got to mourn over the death of a weeaboo penguin with thousands of other people. I'm glad I got to learn and spew simple Japanese words or expressions that the show used as catchphrases, like Tanoshi, Sugoi, Nanoda, Ware wa, and there'd be people out there who'd immediately knew what I was talking about just from saying one word. I'm glad that when one of my favorite franchises was faced with a major injustice, I had the strength of everybody who watched this show with me to back me up when I tried to point out the bullshit behind it. I'm making the fanbase of this show seem like a goddamn cult, but there's a reason why this was the biggest anime controversy of last year and one of the biggest of all time. I've said it before and I'll say it again. People give a shit about Kemono Friends. I can easily say that the fanbase to any other anime series wouldn't have put up this kind of resistance if that series was faced with the same situation, for the most part. Business is harsh in Japan, and people understand that. But making Kemono Friends the target to all that is different. Subjecting Kemono Friends to those conditions is just playing dirty. When a series built its following out of nothing through sheer hard work, only to be seized into the wrong hands for the sake of more control over that series and perhaps more monetary gain along the way, it's like, what the hell? Kemono Friends doesn't deserve that. Kemono Friends is too wholesome for that. And the wholesome community that spawned out of it doesn't deserve what Kadokawa is trying so hard to market down our throats. Let me make one thing clear. This is not Kemono Friends. It is a mere intimidation of it that inherits none of the traits that made us like Kemono Friends. It is a pathetic attempt to mush the franchise into something more artificial and lucrative by a company that doesn't take heed to their own rules. Do not watch this and do not support this. You want to know what to watch instead? You want to know what the real Kemono Friends Season 2 is? Tatsuki and his staff at Yaoyorozu saw an opportunity to work on another televised anime thanks to the success of Kemono Friends, so they're doing just that. I present to you Kemurikuza. I don't know how to pronounce that, but it's an anime based on a web show Tatsuki made back in 2012. It's an original story, there's no Kadokawa involved, Tatsuki couldn't possibly have any more creative freedom. Plus, now that Tatsuki has a huge following behind him, there's a lot of pressure on him to deliver a good anime, so you know he's gonna do just that. Just to smite Kadokawa, like, in your face, bitch, I don't need you guys. I don't know, I might be getting a little cocky, but I have a lot of faith in this project. It premieres January 2019, and I definitely recommend it, because much like how Kemono Friends started out, this show is making itself out to be another underdog. It's among the least popular shows in Mal's Winter 2019 season, which is surprising considering the success of Kemono Friends Season 1. Not only that, there's only a small fraction of people who plan to watch it compared to Kemono Friends Season 2. It's sad, people assume the magic that made them love Kemono Friends is dead, but they're just looking in the wrong direction. Or just maybe, it's time to stop searching at all. It's sad to say, but I don't think another anime like Kemono Friends will come along, at least for a long time. It's not worth comparing Season 2 of Kemono Friends to Season 1 because the best we could have experienced out of Kemono Friends has come and gone. As tragic as it is, it's not worth trying to pick up the pieces. Simply put, Kemono Friends lived long enough to become what it set itself to stand out against. A contrived product made to make money before making the viewer happy. And to be fair, you could argue that Season 1 was trying to accomplish that too. After all, the anime was made to make the smartphone game and ultimately the franchise more popular. But to me, Kemono Friends the anime and Kemono Friends the franchise are two entirely separate products with two different communities. Kemono Friends the anime is dead, but Kemono Friends the franchise lives on, so this kind of thing was bound to happen eventually regardless of who was in charge. Kadokawa didn't single-handedly bring an end to this sense of community the show had created, but rather they're a catalyst to the show's lifespan. The kind of reception Kemono Friends generated isn't something you can consciously force, it's a product of luck and love. That's why, as I've said at the beginning of this long video, Kemono Friends and its director Tatsuki are easily what I could consider anime legends among the ranks of Hayao Miyazaki in Spirited Away or Makoto Shinkai in Your Name. You may laugh at the thought of that, or at least you may initially have, but part of what constitutes this terminology is what the product can do to its audience. If you're in your mid-20s or 30s and you liked anime as a kid, then it's very likely that you grew up with Miyazaki, just like how Your Name is ushering in a new era of casual anime fans unfamiliar with the medium. With the large success Kemono Friends garnered in Japan and a reach beyond its television series with its smartphone game and whatnot, Kemono Friends was a household name to those who even shunned otaku culture. To some, the series was even unfair to call an anime since visually it looks so foreign compared to 2D animated shows. Its incredibly down-to-earth tone made it engaging even to those who found anime difficult to watch. What the show has to offer makes it great in itself, but most of what makes me and many others love Kemono Friends so much is what it was able to accomplish beyond what you watch. That's why most of this review has been reviewing the impact of Kemono Friends rather than Kemono Friends itself. That's where the value of the show lies. Kemono Friends is an anime about me, about you, about everyone. Everyone is welcome in Japari Park. The first words you hear in the theme song are "Welcome to Japari Park." The first interaction between characters in the show is an embrace, followed by reassurance. The sense of camaraderie is strong, both in the show and its communities. These two elements coincide. They're in harmony. If you want to turn that away because you took one glance at the show and thought it looked ugly, well, you'd probably be throwing that harmony off anyways. But to everyone else, watch Kemono Friends. Watch it if you need something relaxing to cheer you up. Watch it if you love animals, their behaviors, and the science behind them. Watch it if you're in need to realize what makes you great, how your strengths improve the lives of your friends, and how their strengths improve yours. Watch it if you feel the world's against you, and maybe you can't do anything right, and odds aren't always in your favor. Okay, Kemono Friends may not help you to that extent, but if you do choose to watch it, just let it resonate inside you. Let what it has to say sink in. It's a hard hurdle to jump over, but when you do, by the end of it all, you'll be glad to have been a friend.